The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
As he came near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, "If you, even you, had only recognized on this day the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. Indeed, the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up ramparts around you and surround you and hem you in on every side. They will crush you to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave within you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation from God." Then he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling things there. And he said, "It is written, 'My house shall be a house of prayer,' but you have made it a den of robbers." Every day he was teaching in the temple. The chief priests, the scribes, and the leaders of the people kept looking for a way to kill him, but they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were spellbound by what they heard. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Welcome to Jerusalem. We have reached the final stage of the journey with Jesus that has been going on for 10 chapters already in Luke. Luke 9:51 says, "When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem." It hasn't been a quick journey for Jesus and his followers. They all have been working all along the way. But Jesus has never veered from this destination, nor has he ceased trying to teach the disciples and others just what this journey means. And there is still so much they don't understand. Let's imagine the scene for a moment. At the top of the Mount of Olives, we are not in the middle of nowhere. We are on a road crowded with those traveling from far and wide to Jerusalem for the Passover. There is a steady buzz of noise. It's dusty, and it smells of people and animals and blooming trees. Many people have traveled with Jesus. Whenever he goes through a place, he gains more followers. So we're in a bit of a crowd, milling around, maybe sitting on the ground. If we are near Jesus, we know that we're waiting for the colt he has sent his disciples to get. If we're further away in the crowd, we may be wondering why we've stopped walking. We may look around at the people around us, those who have traveled with us, and those who live here, and may be wondering who we are and what we are about. What are we about? What brought us here? What do we think is going to happen? What do we hope will happen? Luke tells us that the whole multitude of disciples, this whole crowd, is praising God joyfully because they have seen God's deeds of power. It is almost Passover. So as we're remembering what we've seen Jesus do, we are also remembering how God delivered the people from enslavement in Egypt generations ago. Fun fact, scholars believe the Exodus took place in the 13th century BCE, which means we are way farther in time from Jesus than Jesus was from Moses. We're hoping and wondering and praying with all our might that this will be our time of liberation, that Jesus is the one who will free us from Roman rule and restore the throne of David. Another fun fact, David ruled in the 10th century BCE, so we are twice as far in time from Jesus as Jesus was from David. We cry out, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." I imagine the energy in that crowd was a lot like the rallies and protests we're seeing these days. Some people are quieter, some people are louder. Chants begin from different groups and they are joined, they die out, they arise somewhere else. We may or may not be aware that some in the crowd are starting to get a little nervous that we're too loud and that we are drawing too much attention from those who may be looking for an opportunity to make an example out of someone who proclaims a power other than Rome. We may be those who are anxious, waiting for the crackdown. We may or may not know that Jesus has refused to shut it down because he knows the coming of God's reign is a movement that cannot be stopped. It can be slowed for sure. But creation itself shouts the glory of God when we cannot or will not. If these were silent, the stones would shout out. Partway down the steep, winding road, Jesus looks up and sees the city. He stops and weeps, his grief visible to any who care to look. What is he seeing that makes him weep? He sees the crowd around him full of hope and expectation. He sees the hubbub in the city as it is preparing for the festival. And he also sees what others might miss or deliberately pass by. The poor in the streets, the sick, the outcasts, the orphans and widows and foreigners and those who grieve, the voiceless victims of violence. He sees Roman soldiers, and he sees the temple police, those whose job is to maintain order so the soldiers have no excuse to make things worse for everyone. There is a church on the Mount of Olives today called Dominus Flevit, meaning the Lord wept. I have been there twice. I have pictures that I took from the courtyard of the church that show razor wire on the wall that surrounds the church. It would make you weep as well to be there, knowing that 2,000 years after Jesus wept, we still do not know the things that make for peace. In the midst of the crowd's joy, Jesus sees the pain of the world. The procession keeps going. We reach the bottom of the hill and we go up the other side through the city gate to the temple. And Jesus kind of loses it. He begins to drive people out of the temple. Luke tells us that Jesus said, "It is written, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." I imagine Jesus had a few more choice words than that. Get out of here, all of you. Your prayers are empty. This is supposed to be the place where you pray to learn what makes for peace so you can go out there and do it. Go, feed the hungry. Go find the oppressed and free them. You see all these people who followed me? They're not following me for fun. They're following me because you are not giving them what they need. And I have shown them that there is hope, that it does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. God has a dream for all of us, and this is not it. Remember the prophets. Remember the vision of Isaiah. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more." The vision Isaiah saw, that is the vision Jesus held up to. The things that make for peace are seeking God's wisdom and walking in God's ways, beating our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks, disarming ourselves and forgetting entirely the art of war. Do we believe it is possible for us to live in God's peace? Do we? Because if we don't believe it is possible, it is not. But if we believe it is possible, we can build it. Jesus' ministry was not about showing people that only he could heal, that only he had access to God's abundance, and that all we have to do is believe hard enough that Jesus can do it. Jesus did not want us to beg him to save us. If he wanted that, he would have let the people make him king. He would have ridden into town on a war horse, not a donkey. He would have protected himself rather than allowing himself to be arrested. We may beg Jesus to save us, but Jesus begs us to save each other, looking to him as an example. You feed them, he told his disciples. Jesus' ministry was about showing us that we already have everything we need to save each other. Jesus did not teach us to pray, "God, do your will." Jesus taught us to pray for God's will to be done on earth by us. We ask God for sustenance, for the courage to resist temptation, for the grace to forgive, so that we can become the instruments of peace that we are praying for. I have come to believe that the hardest part of following Jesus is not carrying our cross. It is mustering the will and courage to pick it up in the first place. In our Lent book study past Wednesday night, one thing we realized is that Jesus always had a choice. He chose to be baptized. He chose to spend time in the wilderness. Yes, the scriptures say he was driven into the wilderness by the Spirit. But what is that? But a choice we feel we cannot decline. He chose disciples to teach, and he chose to teach them over and over, even when they didn't get it. He chose to travel around and proclaim in word and deed the good news of God's dream for us. We can say he was sent, or he was called, or he was driven, But ultimately, Jesus chose. Even when it became obvious that it was dangerous, he chose day after day to work on the side of love and peace. He chose love until the end. I hope you will choose to come to church this Thursday and Friday for our services, where we will reflect more deeply on these choices. We will see Jesus choose to pick up the cross rather than save himself. We will see him ask God to forgive us in the crowd because we do not know what we are doing. Maybe when Jesus was weeping on the hillside, he was weeping not just for Jerusalem, but for us all, for humanity. For we in the crowd who wish we didn't have to choose. For we who fear what will happen if we choose to follow Jesus. And for we who fear what will happen if we choose not to follow. For we who fear that we really have no choice. Maybe Jesus' tears are his prayer, that we will see clearly the choices before us, and that we will let ourselves be guided not by fear, which is not of God, but by love, which is.